Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
And as per usual, I am recording my part of the podcast from my living room. You want to tell people where you are today, Todd?
I'm in Singapore. I'm
Nice.
in the fourth floor restaurant of the hotel that we're staying in, which also happens to be outdoors, and they're playing a lot of the top 40 American hits. But there aren't too many people in here, so I don't think I'm bothering anybody. It's about 10 p.m., but I am a little worried about the sound quality. So if it sounds a little strange to you guys, I do apologize, but that's what's going on.
Well, I gotta say, I wish I were there with you. I think it'd be a little bit more exciting than being here in my living room at 9 o'clock in the morning, but that's all right. All right. Anyway, it's our favorite time of the year again. Fall has rolled around, and we are now moving into October, which of course means Halloween. And so once again this year we've decided to take a look at some movies that are set on or around Halloween and that definitely have a major Halloween vibe. And so I just Googled movies set on Halloween, and I was directed to a Wikipedia page that had a whole big long list of films. And I went through and kind of picked out some of the ones I thought were interesting. And I recommended for this week that we take a look at 2004's Hellbent, which didn't get a lot of attention when it came out. It played some festivals first, and then it had a limited theatrical release. And it's a fairly typical slasher. It's a slasher movie. What makes this a little bit unique, not that there hadn't been a couple movies like this before, and this movie, I think, kind of sparked a trend in this type of movie. But what makes it a little bit unique is that all of the central characters, and pretty much all of the characters really, are gay men. And so instead of your typical slasher where you've got kind of a hodgepodge of stereotypical characters, in this film we follow a group of gay men on Halloween night, young, attractive gay men on Halloween night at a Halloween party in West Hollywood. Did you know anything about this movie? Had you seen it before?
Oh, gosh, no. I didn't know a single thing about this movie. I mean, and I could kind of see why. I mean, it came out in 2004, and it's pretty micro budget. I mean, it is you can tell it's low budget because it's kind of cheap, even though I don't think it's a cheap movie. Actually, I really liked this movie, to be quite honest. I'll be interested to hear what you think of it, but you could tell from the way that it was shot, and I'll tell you, in about 2004, shortly before that, I had shot a movie. I shot a movie in Japan, and I think I used a lot of the same equipment that these guys used. I mean, I guarantee you they were using the same camera I was using. I can tell. And it was shot on video, but they took a lot of pains to really make it seem like a bigger movie than it really is. As far as production value goes. There's a lot of cool scenery. There are a ton of not a lot of characters, main characters in it, but tons of extras, really interesting settings. The lighting is really good and all that.
Yeah.
And it's not enough to overcome that shot on video kind of feel that it gets, but there are some moments when it's quite impressive and it really does shine. So this is the kind of movie that, because it played in some film festivals and then probably went straight to video, and in 2004 we weren't streaming stuff, online. There's no question I wouldn't have heard of this movie. No, absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember where I first heard of it. I don't know if it was on Netflix for a little while or what, but I had seen it, and it had been quite a long time ago. And
you did. You saw this before.
Yeah, I had seen it before. I can imagine that probably I was drawn to it because it was advertised as a LGBTQ movie, and I personally hadn't seen a lot of that in horror. We're up to, I don't know, we're in our 140-something episodes, and we've only done maybe 2 other movies that had some queer themes. I was trying to think back. I know we did Sleepaway Camp. The other one that I was thinking of, and it could be considered somewhat of a stretch, but Let Me In had some kind of sexuality themes going on there.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I watched this movie again, and at first I was a little bit skeptical. I don't know. Maybe I'll get to why in a second. But as we got through more of it, especially by kind of the halfway point, I was like, you know what, this is pretty good. It's actually a pretty good slasher. And by the time it was over, I was really satisfied with it. I hadn't really read a lot about it beforehand, but I went and tried to find some stuff, and I was a little bit disappointed because there really wasn't much info in the IMDb entry. But then I went to Wikipedia, and there was some really interesting stuff there. And the thing that I was most interested in was its conception. I guess there were these executive producers who had had some, relative success with horror films in the past. Some of them a little bit more mainstream, like Halloween 2 and Halloween 3. Some of them a little bit more obscure. But these producers just had this concept that they wanted to make a serial killer film featuring homosexual characters. And they came up with this general concept. They wanted it to be on Halloween night, and they wanted these gay men to be pursued by a masked killer. And so they approached this openly gay art director, Paul Etheridge Outs. They approached him, and he had never directed a film on his own, and he had never written a film on his own. And they tasked him with both of those things. And they gave him the concept, and he was interested, but he didn't really know a whole lot about the horror genre or the slasher genre. So he went and he watched as many 80s horror films as he could find, especially slasher films. And he noticed trends. And of course there are in these types of movies. But he kind of figured out the structure of the narrative, and he realized that there were these stock character types, the final girl, the ingenue, the slut, the tough guy. And so he translated that just onto gay male characters, and really that's what you get. They also wanted this to be a movie where the character's homosexuality was blatant, but also not the central focus, that it was just sort of incidental to their characters. The characters were all men who were comfortable in their sexuality and, just went about their lives. It wasn't a movie about them being gay. They just happened to be gay. And it followed them. And then it follows the pretty straightforward serial or slasher movie where you've got this masked character who follows them around, motives pretty much unknown, and he starts kind of picking them off one by one. And even though all of the kills are pretty much the same, this guy, he's this big, muscly guy, and he's all painted up kind of like in this red-gray. He's dressed as a devil, and he's got this devil mask on, and he's really intimidating. And he doesn't speak. They decided originally he had lines in the film, but they decided to cut all of his dialogue because they wanted to leave him as much to the imagination of the viewers as they could. They wanted the viewer to be able to project their own fears onto this character, and they were afraid that whatever voice they gave him would muddy that and would limit people's ability to kind of draw their own conclusions and whatnot. So he never talks, and the way that he kills the people is pretty consistent. He carries around this scythe, and he beheads people. And that's, it in a nutshell. But I just thought that it was clever. I didn't necessarily pick up on how stereotypical it was, especially with those stereotypical tropes of the characters. But then, having read that, I was like, oh yeah, I see what they did there.
It wasn't obvious.
No, it's not obvious, but in hindsight it kind of is, right?
Yeah, it is in hindsight, and maybe that has to do with the gender thing. Maybe that has to do with the fact that it's all men in this movie. Like, there isn't a woman in sight, really. Oh, there are just like two women who are like extras. They come and they go. And they don't really have speaking roles or anything like that. And so many of those stereotypes that we slip into with those slasher movies are always they always have women in there too, and there's often a lot of the gender kind of going back and forth, like the women are weak except for the one woman who's a final girl who is strong, and some guy's a douchey asshole who's always trying to get in some other woman's pants, and all of this kind of thing seems to play so much on gender that when you have all are men, I think that even though, like you said, those tropes are in there, they're a lot less recognizable to us right on the face. Maybe they don't seem so familiar, right?
Yeah, I agree. The other thing that I found interesting was that they wanted a racially diverse cast for the movie, and they put out, kind of a cattle call, and they specifically invited a large group of actors of color, but none of them showed up. And the writer/director speculates that for whatever reason, whether it be, cultural or whatever, that people of color just weren't as comfortable playing homosexual characters. And so they ended up having to cast pretty much an entirely white cast, which was somewhat of a disappointment, and it's noticeable. I mean, you notice that there really aren't any people of color in the movie, which is kind of unfortunate, but it wasn't for lack of effort on their part, which I appreciate. And I also found it interesting that all of our main characters, who we'll get to here in just a second, were played by straight men.
Yeah.
And, I think in 2018, that might ruffle some feathers. There's a lot of debate about representation in films, and some people have taken some flack for casting white actors in roles that were conceived for people of color. And so there's been some backlash, but, with this little independent movie, I don't think it really caused much of a stir. And frankly, it didn't bother me at all. All of these men were comfortable kissing one another, being sexually playful with one another. I read that the only complaint, one of the guys complained after a kissing scene that his face hurt because the other guy had 5 o'clock shadow. And one of the characters is in drag the whole movie. And I guess he kept falling down because he couldn't walk in the heels. But it even worked for his character, because even though he's a gay man, I'm sure our listeners know that not all gay men are drag queens.
Yeah.
So it worked for his character that he wasn't particularly comfortable in drag. It was something that he was kind of doing as a gag for the night for Halloween.
Yeah, it was a Halloween thing, and he even said something to somebody else at one point, like, I don't always dress this way, or something like that.
Right.
Yeah, so it did. It worked a lot. It worked well. What I really, really enjoyed about this movie, and I'll have to say, after about 10 minutes, I was like, I think I'm really getting into this, is because this movie, for me anyway, and now you can tell me if I'm wrong, or maybe you don't even know, Craig, but this movie for me was like a window into a world that is totally not ever been a part of my world, and never will be, Right. It was just really fascinating to follow these horny gay guys around in one evening on this Halloween night at this party, and them joking with each other, and the kinds of stuff they joked about, and the places they went, and the stuff that was on their minds, and I just more than anything, I think I really invested myself in the characters because I really liked hanging out with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
It was interesting to me as a straight man who's just, I mean, of course, I like most straight men. I've plenty of gay friends, but, there's always going to be, it's just like going out with a group of women, I'm always going to be odd man out, and they're never going to be their true selves or bare their selves or kind of like do their girly things with me there, It would be kind of the same sort of thing here, and so this was just really interesting to me. I don't know if the movie was accurate in its portrayal of what a night out, or if it was maybe a little exploitative, or maybe just a little over the top. I don't know. You could tell me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly no expert, and I'm really pretty vanilla, Like, I'm a stay-at-home kind of guy. I'm almost 40 years old. Anything like this is very far removed from my life today. But I'm glad to hear you say that. And, I expected that that's what you would say. But I was talking to my partner last night, and I'm like, I hope I don't have to have this talk with Todd. And I said, and I don't think that I will. But I know that there would be some straight men, who would watch this movie and be uncomfortable because there is blatant sexuality. And you've got men kissing one another. You've got men together in sexual situations. And that makes some straight men uncomfortable, which I'll never understand. Because I am gay, but I watch these slasher movies all the time, and I watch boobies flopping around, and I watch, guys and girls making out and having sex, and girls making out and having sex, and it doesn't do anything for me, but it doesn't make me uncomfortable either. And so I just don't understand how some guys, and I know you're not like this, but how some guys get uncomfortable by that with that. Well,
you know, I think there was a time when I was, Craig. You know, when I was much younger, when I was told that this was a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I kind of grew up, you know, with that mindset that I had to overcome. And so when you're told it's a bad thing or that there's something wrong or unnatural about it, then naturally you get uncomfortable seeing it. You know what I mean? I think that's where it is. And then being a man, you know, and that, like I said, just isn't a part of my world. I just don't have those kinds of attractions in the slightest. Although, you know, there are people, I mean, gender is very fluid, and gender is along a spectrum. You can be wholly attracted to women, you can be wholly attracted to men. A lot of people fall somewhere in the middle.
Right.
In fact, a couple of the characters in this movie are bouncing back and forth. And that's cool to see, too. The movie felt very honest to me. Like I said, maybe when I was a kid and watching this would have made me really uncomfortable. Now, as a 40-year-old adult, you know, a little wiser to the world, it was just fascinating to me because, like I said, it's a window. And it's, again, I'm sure there probably is a whole genre of films nowadays that are geared towards homosexual men, star homosexual people.
Right.
And it's kind of like rom-coms for women, you know, that kind of thing. But I've never seen one. I mean, I never have. And it's not because I'm not interested. It's just because it never has crossed my mind. And they're not that, you know, they're not splashed up on the marquee, right? I mean, I think they're still, sadly, probably direct-to-video or direct-to-streaming kind of things for the most part, until one or two of these gets real big breakthrough and folks realize there's a big market for it, as I'm sure there is.
Well, and some of those that you're talking about, there are some studios that crank these out, and they're really, really bad. I mean, they're just opportunities to get a bunch of very attractive men together running around in their underwear, and that's really all there is to it. And so just like in any subgenre, there's the good and the bad, and I would argue that this is pretty good. As far as representation is concerned, I think that this is fair representation. I think that this is kind of a look into a world, one that I have never fully been immersed in, but I know some of these guys, and have known some of these guys. And when I was younger, you know, I was a little bit wilder there for a little while. And what's the word? It's not sleaziness or sluttiness, you know, what people choose to do, you know, with their sex lives and their bodies. I am very much of the opinion that that's people's choice. So I don't have any problem with men who are okay with casual hookups and things. You know, it's not my thing and really never has been, but, you know, there is that culture. And, you know, West Hollywood, they shot like 6 hours of Carnival at West Hollywood, and they only ended up using a couple of minutes of it, I think. But you can see it, you know, it's there, and this is real. You know, these people get together and they get dressed up, and it's very celebratory. There is a component of drug culture, but then I also thought that it was fair in showing that not all gay guys are the same. You know, they're different, you know. Some of them are promiscuous, some of them are not. You know, some of them dress in leather, some of them dress in khakis and button-down shirts. You know, it's I thought it was fair representation, and I thought that these guys, even though they are straight, really were so comfortable that I appreciated their portrayal. And I appreciated, not that there's anything wrong with gay men who are effeminate. I have no problem with that, but I think that that's kind of a stereotype that's used to denigrate homosexuals sometimes. And these guys, even though they're gay and they kiss other guys, they're guys.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought that it was fair. And the other thing that I really liked about the portrayal was our four main guys. Eddie, who I guess is the final girl, Chaz, who is the slutty one, Toby, who, because he's, you know, blonde and in drag and is the really beautiful one, is kind of the ingenue, and then Joey doesn't really fit the tough guy, but he's, you know, into jocks and stuff like that. What I liked about the four of them was that their friendship seemed really genuine.
Yeah.
And it seemed like they were really comfortable together, and that is real. And that is something that I have experienced, especially in college, where there was, a tight-knit gay community. I had lots of guy friends, and we were very comfortable with one another. And yeah, we would date one another sometimes and, other stuff sometimes, but mostly, we were friends, and we were comfortable talking with one another. We were comfortable being ourselves, and I really liked that about the movie. And, so that's kind of the socio-political stuff. Should we get into the plot?
Should we talk about it? I feel like we need to at some point, right?
Right.
Well, the way that the movie starts out actually did make me uncomfortable, but not for those reasons. The movie starts out with a guy running down through the woods, and it's dark. And actually, talk about really good cinematography choices. I thought it was really cool that in this dark woods where everything is kind of black and white, he's running down inexplicably with a big pile of balloons.
Yeah, helium balloons, right?
Bright red and bright blue balloons, and he's being chased by his friend, and they end up in the backseat of a car. And they're trying to make out, but they also have these balloons in the backseat, and they're starting to get pretty hot and heavy with it. And what made me uncomfortable about this scene was, my God, you guys are old enough. You should not be in the back seat of a car
right.
with these balloons in your face. It was just like claustrophobia. I was like, come on, man. Like I wanted them to get out of the back seat of this car just because it made me uncomfortable how crammed in they were and trying to maneuver around in there. Well, eventually one of them rolls down the window and he's got his shirt off, and the other dude's starting to pull his pants off, and he's kind of sitting halfway out the window. At the same time, we're seeing some POV shots from the woods, so we know somebody's watching them. And then we see flashes go in front of the camera of a figure, and we see these horns and whatnot on the top of this figure. And we see that hook side thing. And then as this guy is leaning back, getting pleasured as he's outside the window, this guy with the hook comes by and slices his head clean off at the neck. And it's so clean and so quick that the other guy doesn't even hear it until he pulls him in or leans out the window or something, and sees that his head is gone. And at that same time, coming around the other side, the window gets smashed, and we get the idea that he's killed as well. And he is, in fact, killed as well. What a great opening scene, though.
Yeah, it was really good.
It really was. And again, it's like you can swap male for female here, and it is an absolute trope. How many horror movies start out like this with two people making out in the back of a car, and then they both get killed, and that's how it starts.
Yeah.
But for this film, it becomes kind of a focal point because they're the first to get murdered, and the next scene is inside of a police station. And one of the guys, our main character, Eddie, is sitting behind the computer in the police station, clicking through wanted photos or something. And a woman comes up to him, one of the officers, and slaps some stuff down on his desk like he's the detective, right? Like, well, we got another couple, we got a murder in. It was a real nasty one this time. Heads cut clean off, and here are the crime scene photos, and she slaps them down for him. And he, in the meantime, had also printed out a bunch of these wanted.
It looked like mugshots.
Happy Halloween.
Jesus Christ.
Fresh kills. Photos courtesy of your friendly homicide department.
Thanks.
Hello. Oh, this is a nice lineup.
Yeah.
You planning on some personal time in the bathroom later?
That's very funny.
No problem. It's all good.
Anyway, it was really strange because again, you're getting the impression, I think you were meant to get the impression that he is actually a police officer. It turns out that he's just this girl's brother.
Yeah.
She's the police officer, and he's like, I don't know, hanging out in the police station, going through the computer?
I think he's a technician, because she says something about how he needs to fix the printer.
Oh, okay.
This scene, frankly, was a little bit clunky because he's clicking through these mugshots and printing them out, and it's really unclear why. I think that what this is supposed to do is to establish that he's turned on by bad boys.
Okay.
And so
I thought it was weirder than that. I thought it was strange because not only is he maybe turned on by Bad Boys. I mean, he's printing out these pictures. Okay, I get that, but then the fact that she's presenting him with these bloody crime scene photos that he also seemed kind of fascinated by. I thought there was a bit more weirdness there than that. I don't think it was, but it was certainly the impression I got at the very beginning.
Yeah, it was odd. I didn't know what to make of it either. But he ends up being kind of even though he's into Bad Boys, he's kind of the goody-goody of the bunch.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the following scenes, well, there's a really cool credits scene where, it's all... We get the credits, but it's shot against kind of this, I don't know, saturated red, almost like fire tones, and we see some of this footage that I assume is real footage from Carnival. And then we just kind of get your standard introduction to the rest of the characters. The police chief, who was the only guy in the whole movie that I recognized. He had been in a couple other movies. I don't remember. His name was Ren T. Brown, and he was in Hellraiser 4. And I remembered him from a Robert Downey Jr. movie, Heart and Souls, from the 90s.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a cop. He was a cop in that movie, too. Yeah. The police chief asks Eddie to distribute these flyers, I guess, looking for information about these murders or whatever. And so he goes around and he's hanging up the flyers, and it's kind of goofy because he's wearing his dad's. His dad was
so
a cop.
dumb. There's no way that they would allow this to happen, right? He asked him to go and hang out these flyers. It's like, oh, can I wear my dad's uniform? Okay, you can wear your dad's uniform. And he digs his dad's uniform out of the closet. I guess his dad's dead, right? And then he goes by like a Halloween store and buys a badge and puts it on, like this cheap plastic badge. It's kind of stupid. I thought this was really dumb.
And then he runs around town like acting like he's really a cop. Like he's like directing traffic, and it's really pretty stupid. Yeah. But as he's passing these flyers out, he sees this guy outside of a tattoo shop. This buff kind of motorcycle type guy, and of course the guy comes out for a smoke without his shirt on because he's getting a tattoo, and Eddie's immediately attracted to him, so he goes over and goes into the tattoo parlor under the guise of he wants to hang up one of these flyers or whatever, and he's just staring at this guy while he's getting a tattoo, and eventually the guy catches his eye in a mirror, and it makes Eddie freak out and drop all of his papers, and he just kind of runs out of there.
No, wait a second, though. Then there was that shot of the blood kind of slowly dripping down.
Yeah.
That coupled with the whole bit about the crime scene photos in the beginning still had me feeling weird about Eddie, like he was getting off on the blood thing too. I don't know.
Fair enough.
It was just these little things. I was like, what are they trying to say about this guy? And it wasn't until a little bit into the movie that I realized I don't think they were trying to say anything like that about him, because like you said, he's the total goody-goody. It just was a little clunky. Maybe they were focusing on these things for other reasons. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think that watching that drop of blood run down this guy's back was an opportunity to highlight this guy's body. It ran right down to his waistline, which you could see down just a tiny little bit. And I think that's what they were going for. But anyway, then they have a little chat outside the tattoo parlor, and the guy doesn't seem to be really interested at all, and eventually he just goes off. And part of it's because Eddie's kind of a bumbling doofus, and trying to talk to this guy.
Yeah.
But then he continues doing flyers, and he comes to this car where there are people having sex in the car, and he knocks on the car window, and you think that he's just doing his cop gag again, and this girl pops up, and she's like, oh no, it's a cop. And she's like, I'm 18, I swear I can prove it. Meanwhile, this guy gets out of the car, and it turns out that this is one of Eddie's roommates, Chaz. And I don't know. Initially, I think I was thinking, wait, I thought they were all gay. And then another guy comes out of the car, too. And it turns out that Chaz had picked up this couple in the diner, and they were having a three-way in the car. Chaz is the slutty, dirty one, but it's funny. And he's charismatic. Like, that's the thing. Like, all of the characters are kind of charismatic. So it's not like, oh, he's the slutty one, so I don't like him. No, like, he seems like a really nice, fun guy. He just likes sex a lot. They go into the diner, and another one of their roommates is Joey. He works in there, and their fourth roommate, Toby, joins them, and Toby is in full drag, and basically what he says is, I'm a sex symbol every other night of the year. Tonight, I just kind of want to be left alone. So it's like, I'm so gorgeous as a man, I'm dressing as a woman, so I won't have to, like, get all these guys away from me or whatever. It's kind of silly, but whatever. It's a slasher movie, and they're all having fun, and...
This is the one night of the year, Halloween, when you get to indulge your most perverse and twisted fantasies, and nobody cares.
Jared Reynolds.
All I want. That is so potential. Hey, hand me my costume back here, will you?
So what about you, Chaz?
Oh, you know me, man. White is meant for living.
And so they're going to go to West Hollywood, and they're going to go to this big carnival, and they get in the car, and they're just talking and chumming it up, and it's very comfortable and natural. And but Chaz drives them to the spot of the murder, which apparently is only a quick jaunt through the woods to get to the carnival.
It just so happens.
Yeah, it just so happens.
It's kind of weird that he does that. It leads to a pretty good jump scare, I think, where they're talking about it. And that, again, for a first-time director, is very clever. He's showing a lot of the window behind them, which is kind of what you do when you're a little concerned that there might be something coming in out the window. And so as a viewer, you're kind of looking for it, and you're waiting. And I think it's Joey, as they're talking about the murder, Joey reaches around from the back seat through the window to the front seat and grabs Toby right at that right moment and freaks him out. And I jumped. I thought it was...
I did too.
To be able to put these tropes together so well that... even if you can kind of see them coming a mile away, they're still effective, I thought was pretty good.
Yeah, I agree. And so then they're sitting there talking about it, and they get out, and they're going to walk through the woods to get to the party, and they're like, oh, well, it's going to be our last chance to pee for a while, so let's all pee. And they all kind of spread out in this clearing in the woods.
Really?
and they're peeing and, just kind of joking with one another. And then Eddie sees that somebody is watching them from the bushes, and he calls their attention to it, and they all kind of gather together, and they all see him, and it's the killer. It's the same killer that we've seen, and we know that. Now, they don't think much of it. They think that this guy is cruising them, which for you straight folks out there is, this phenomenon where, guys kind of hang out at truck stops or in public parks and they're looking for sex or whatever. This is not part of my gay experience, but I've seen movies about it.
This isn't me, but, I've heard stories.
No, I'm serious. It's not. And my mom might listen to this, and I don't want her to get the wrong impression.
Well, it's so funny because at some point they're all taunting him, and then they turn around and they moon him. And the guy runs away or something like that. And...
He snubbed us? Are you kidding me? 4 perfect young naked asses? Who walks away from that?
But they think he runs away, and so like they're pulling up their pants and zipping up or whatever. But then he pops up again, like really close to them, and it scares them. So they take off running. Well, and they also at first they think he's like playing with himself, but because they can only kind of see him in silhouette, and they're impressed with his physique. And this guy is a very good-looking physical specimen. And at first they think that he's playing with himself, but then they realize that it's the handle of his knife. And they think, now they know he's got a knife, and he pops up right next to them. So they take off running. And they get there, but, it's almost like, ha-ha, that was funny, no big deal. But then they realize that he's followed them there, too. And they're still not particularly concerned. It's like they think that he's just kind of messing with them or... maybe has his eye on one of them or something.
Yeah.
And so they make eye contact with him, and but they go off and do their own thing. And Eddie ends up seeing his crush, the biker guy, going into this leather bar. And they hadn't been planning on going to the leather bar, but Eddie really wants to follow this guy, so they all go. It's pretty cool inside. It's all decorated for Halloween. There's lots of like bondage stuff and cages and guys dancing in cages and, fake limbs hanging from the ceiling. And
then there's a guy on stage who is doing some gay metal rock rap.
It's gay. Yeah, it's gay punk. There actually was a term for it, and I don't have it in front of me, so I can't remember. But it was a musical movement that was going on at the time that the writer director didn't really know about the scene, but in preparing for this movie, he found out about it, and he wanted to include it in the movie. And there was this one band, Nick Name, and like that was the name of the lead singer.
Yeah.
Nick Name and the somethings. So he approached this band to see if they would write some music for the movie and perform in this club, and they did. And I didn't know this until after, but the lead singer of the band is the killer. Like, not in the world of the movie, like, they're not the same character, but the guy who's the lead singer of the band is the guy that plays the killer.
He's the same. He's the actor. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was listening. The only reason I went down that particular rabbit hole is because the lyrics that he was saying were so disgusting.
They were.
I was like, what is this? And so I had to look him up, and I found out this guy, I don't know, he put out a couple albums, and he's an ex-Mormon missionary from Utah.
Oh, my gosh.
I just had to
That's
laugh
wild.
at that. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't like. What he was singing was very fast. You know, it's very punk, and so the lyrics flew by really fast, and I would just get little bits of them, and I'd be like, "What?" like I'm like clutching my pearls, like, "Oh my!"
Collecting your pearls. That's great.
But it's a fun scene, and
I'm sorry. This again is this whole leather world, this leather bar, and I wondered, one person we haven't really talked about yet, but bears mentioning is Joey. His whole goal for the evening is to get some guy's number. And he's the only one actually dressed in leather. That was his costume for the night. He's like the young'un of the group or whatever that they're trying to take care of. And anyway, so he kind of fits right here at home in this leather bar, and this guy, Nick Name, pulls him up on stage. And at first he's up there and he's kind of dancing. He's a little uncomfortable, and he kind of pushes him aside, and he says, just go with it, kid. You're like, what is he doing? And two guys grab him and take him to this table that's out in the audience and lay him down on this table, and they have these giant fake chainsaws, and they're fake cutting him up with the chainsaws, and the chainsaws are squirting blood all over. It's like sort of this like magic trick / bloodletting kind of like fake bloodletting kind of leather bar thing. And Nick ends up like underneath the table, and these guys, when the lights kind of go out and come back up, they're holding like a fake head of his up above,
right,
to the crowd and everybody. It's just part of it's like a whole show. It's kind of a whole show kind of thing. And he crawls out and away to the bathroom.
I mean, it's Halloween, cool. And it was cool. It was fun. Now, I personally wouldn't want that to happen to me because I wouldn't want to be covered in fake blood all night long. But if I witnessed it happening, I would be like, oh my gosh, this party rocks.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also something a little sexual about it, I've actually heard of some of these clubs. When I moved to Japan, the guy that I replaced at the school apparently was a videographer, and he would actually go to some of these like leather bar kind of clubs in Japan, and he was tasked with videotaping the shows and things like that. And some of his friends told me some of this weird stuff that they did in these places, and it had me clutching my pearls too.
Yeah, I've never been to a leather bar.
But this kind of scene, like, you just don't see it in these kind of movies. You just don't. So it was cool. It was very unique.
Unless it's being presented as something really seedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the detectives will end up here like for a murder investigation. And everybody's really seedy and it's all smoke and shadow and...
Yeah, like 8mm or some really nasty. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but this I mean, it seemed like they were having a good time. It was a party and everybody's having a good time. And there were guys in leathers there, but it was Halloween, so there are all kinds of people dressed in different things.
Yeah.
And everybody's drinking and dancing and having a good time. And Eddie finds his guy, who it ends up his name is Jake, and it's a little bit awkward at first. But they have, a little bit of innuendo, banter, and eventually, they not hook up, but they're interested in one another, and so they're going to kind of get to know each other or whatever. Meanwhile, Joey sees the guy that he's interested in, and this guy, of course, is dressed in a football jersey, and like he's got
an entourage,
and he's got like the grease paint under his eyes, like he's going to play football or whatever. And he's got this entourage, and Joey, who's kind of this meek one, like you said, like the youngin', he gathers up the courage to go talk to this guy, and the guy's friends are really rude to Joey. Now, the guy.
He's not exactly kind either.
No.
Yeah.
He's not exactly kind, but he's not as condescending and rude, and you can kind of see that he's a little bit embarrassed by how rude his friends are being, but he doesn't say anything.
No.
And so Joey just feels totally dejected. It turns out that Jake and Eddie want to go somewhere else. They want to go to the arcade. Toby is going to go along with them, but Chaz is going to stay back with Joey and make sure that he's okay. And so he takes Joey down to this bathroom underneath the club where there's not as many people, but it is kind of like the seedy bathroom where people are doing drugs and hooking up and stuff like that. But Chaz kind of clears out the bathroom and gives him this little pep talk about how it's going to be okay. We'll get you cleaned up. It's not that big a deal. And so he leaves him there in the bathroom, and he goes out and he stands out there outside the door. He's already popped one ecstasy earlier in the night. Now he pops another one. He gets distracted by a hot guy, so he leaves his post or whatever. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Joey gets the impression, and we get the impression, that somebody's watching him, and he starts looking around in the bathroom, and just as he's about to open this one stall, somebody grabs him from behind. It's another good jump scare, but it turns out it's his crush.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ, man. I didn't scare you. Your friend told me you were in here. I owe you my number. Yeah? Sorry about before. My friends are in a mood tonight, and... Listen, we're all supposed to go to breakfast tomorrow. I could ditch them if I had a better offer.
And he gives him his number, and he says, "I hope I see you tomorrow." And he gives him a kiss, just an innocent kiss. And then he leaves. And Joey is so happy and so excited, and he's kind of jumping for joy. And then he gets grabbed by the killer and gets his head cut off.
Oh, dude, this scene alone, just made me want to cry. I really, my heart went out for Joey from the very beginning. Okay, he's this guy. And then when he approaches this dude, I just felt so bad for him. He's in the bathroom and he's dejected. And then when this guy comes in and has his moment with him, I couldn't be happy for Joey because I could see it coming a mile away. I knew Joey was going to get it,
Oh, yeah.
And I just felt so bad. It really touched me pretty emotionally, actually.
Yeah, he was... Yeah, the actor was, he's just kind of this sweet, unassuming little guy, and it was very easy to feel for him. He felt very much like a little brother, and that's the vibe that you got from his other friends too. Like Chaz, is kind of the slutty one or whatever, but when he takes Joey downstairs, he's just really sweet with him, and he wants to comfort him, and he wants to tell him it's okay, and it's not you. That guy's just a jerk. You're a great guy, and it was very genuinely friendly, and I thought that was a really nice touch to the movie overall. We cut back to the other three, and now that Jake and Eddie are, kind of coupling around a little bit, I think Toby kind of feels like a third wheel, so he goes off on his own. He's like, I need a drink. I'll hook up with you guys later. And he goes off on his own, and he starts drinking heavily. And, it's funny because these characters are not entirely flat. Yes, they represent tropes and stereotypes, but they're not entirely flat.
No.
This guy who was so confident in himself, so confident that he would have to be, batting guys away from him, now that he's in drag and he doesn't look like his normal self, he's not getting the kind of attention that he's used to, and it bothers him.
Yeah.
It really bothers him. So we see that, and then we cut back to Chaz, who is tripping on ecstasy, and he's dancing in the club with the lights, and they give us kind of point of view so we can see that he's not necessarily hallucinating, but tripping. And the killer approaches him on the dance floor, and just basically starts not gutting him, but slicing away at him with his knife. And I guess the implication is that because Chaz is so wasted that at first he doesn't know. Now, I don't think that rings true. I don't care what kind of state I was in. I would notice if somebody was cutting huge gashes into my abdomen. But it's not like he doesn't realize anything is wrong. He gets a look on his face and he touches his abdomen and he pulls his hands up and he sees the blood. But before he can react, the guy cuts his head off and the body just falls to the ground.
Yeah.
And all these people are dancing all around. And I guess, we've talked about this before. Like, if you're going to kill somebody, Halloween would be a good time to do it because people are expecting to see carnage around. Now, this seemed a little bit extreme to me. Again, I think if I had seen this, I would have been getting off the dance floor.
Well,
but,
I bought it hook, line, and sinker because there was a lot of strobe going on. And this was technically, I thought, a very well done scene. In that, with the strobes, we watched Hell House LLC or whatever.
Yeah.
And they did a similar. I mean, it's not the same, but it's similar where they worked with strobe, and that crazy things would happen during the strobe light. And I thought that was very well edited. This scene also extremely well edited and staged. I thought to make it just convincing enough that on a dance floor, even though it's crowded, and Halloween puts it a little bit higher that and about anything could happen, but I just sort of thought that the strobing aspect of what was going on would be enough to keep people distracted, to keep people from really noticing what's happening. And but for us as the viewer, knowing what's going on, it was still really effective, I thought. And I thought it was well edited, and this was a standout scene in the movie for me, quite honestly. I was impressed at how this was done. Openly in the middle of a dance floor, this killer thought he could get away with it and did, and supposedly chopped this guy's head off and fell down, and nobody really ended up noticing, right? I bought it. I actually bought it. I thought it was good.
I guess, come to think of it, this is still the same venue where they did the whole chainsaw thing. So, stuff like this had been going on.
Could
so
be
maybe
part of the
people
show.
wouldn't.
Yeah. Sure.
So anyway, then the killer has the two heads that he's collected so far in a bag, and he's meanwhile all this happens within like 10 feet of Toby. Toby's just sitting at the bar, but just like everybody else, he's oblivious to it. But he sees the guy walking out, and he follows him out, and this part was sad. Like he's just so desperate, like he's throwing himself at this guy.
Hey, I like your costume. You work out, right? I can tell. You play any sports? What gym do you go to? Well, you've got enough candy already? You couldn't use a little more? I don't always look like this, you superficial faggot. It's Halloween, Jesus. God, here, look. My driver's license. It's not bad, huh?
And the guy comes back, the killer comes back and like touches his face and like smears his makeup and stuff, kind of in a sensual way. But then he just chops his head off too. I mean, it happens really quickly.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Eddie is starting to get worried about Joey, and so he wants to go back to the leather bar to look for him, and Jake goes with him. And it's a crime scene now, which they don't seem to be particularly concerned about, which is weird. Jake's bike, I guess, is parked in the back, and the cops are giving him trouble about going to get it, but he sneaks around there, and somehow he and Eddie end up on opposite sides of this tall chain link fence, and the killer attacks Eddie from behind, but just like hits him, doesn't cut his head off or whatever. So then there's this little chase in the alley, and I think that Eddie locks himself in like one of those cages from inside the venue that guys were dancing in, and the guy's swinging his scythe at him, and the tip of it gets him right in the eye, but he has a glass eye. Now there's been little things to hint at this throughout, like he said that he had injured his eye, like he had wanted to be a cop but he couldn't pass the physical because he had injured his eye, so he had no depth perception and stuff like that. But it was a cool shot, I mean, it's stupid because
it is stupid.
It physically wouldn't work this way. It's not like that glass eye is just going to stop this scythe or whatever, but it looks cool. But the cops show up, and the killer runs away, and then we see Jake and Eddie at the police station, and they're kind of shaken up, but not really all that much.
I was going to say, it's just so funny because Eddie just sort of plays it off. Like, he doesn't even talk about it, which is so weird. He got stabbed in the glass eye by this guy, and he's got almost nothing to say. It's like he's going to go on. This was the one part of this movie that I thought was so ridiculous it didn't ring true at all. You know, he should be freaking out.
Yeah,
I mean, they know there's a killer loose. He just had an encounter with the killer. He almost got him with a freaking thing, and they just, okay, we're going to go back to my house now. He doesn't say anything.
Well,
Stupid.
and he goes back to his house, and none of his roommates are there, and like, you wouldn't even be a little bit worried. Like, you know that people were getting killed at this thing, and your roommates aren't around. Like, I don't know, but I guess he's just too intent on hooking up, and so they start, it's flirty, and they're,
Jake.
Yeah, him and Jake, and and Jake won't kiss him, but they're getting physical, and they end up in the bedroom, and Jake uses Eddie's handcuffs from his police outfit to handcuff him to the bed, and then Eddie said, that's right, Eddie says, there's some condoms in the bathroom. So Jake goes to get some condoms, and then he gets attacked by the killer, sliced in the abdomen like Chaz had. And I thought he was dead. And then the killer starts coming towards Eddie, and Eddie sees him, but he's chained to the bed, and he's trying to get out. And then, right as the killer is leaning over him, he gets hit in the back of the head and knocked out by Jake, who is apparently injured but not dead.
Yeah.
Eddie squeezes his hands out of the handcuffs. Tends to Jake briefly, and then
Too
goes
briefly.
to call 911. Right.
I'm sorry. This is where it starts to go a little off the rails as far as believability goes. And again, it's
Sure.
It's tropes and whatnot, but Eddie just totally leaves Jake. Like, he doesn't give a shit. I mean, he supposedly does, but Jake is half injured, and Eddie runs out of there and into the kitchen to try to find a knife, and pretty soon it's just the Eddie show. And he knows there's another killer in there. He doesn't stay by Jake's side. He briefly tries to call for help, but it's 2004 and nobody has a cell phone, and he has this like remote phone, and he tries and it doesn't go through, and then he notices that the actual base station or whatever those phones are supposed to plug into that they communicate with is unplugged. Anyway, there's this whole encounter where then he backs himself into the kitchen and into a closet in the kitchen and into the door, and as he opens the door and backs himself in, a head falls down, and basically all the heads of his friends are in there, and guess who else is in there? The killer, who springs out. Mm-hmm. This is where it got really stupid.
I don't know. It didn't bother me all that much.
It's the typical for this kind of movie, but
It is typical. It's the final showdown, and so, the killer's chasing him through the house. He ends up back in the bedroom. He closes the door, gets it locked, but then the guy starts using his scythe to, chop the door down. So Eddie picks up Jake and puts him out on the fire escape and says, "You'll be safe here," and then he goes to the top of his closet where he has a gun. It's his dad's gun, and he gets it, but then the killer gets in and knocks him down, and so he drops all the bullets. Eventually, he gets the gun and gets it loaded. The killer knocks him out onto the fire escape, too, and they struggle, and the killer has him kind of backed over the railing, and he drops the gun. The gun lands on the level below, and then this part, the killer has him pinned, and he comes in really close, and he sticks his tongue out, and he removes Eddie's glass eye with his tongue.
Yeah.
Which I just thought was so creepy.
It was.
So creepy. And he ends up throwing Eddie over the side, but Eddie still has one half of the handcuff on, and the other half catches on the fire escape. So Eddie's just hanging there. The killer goes after Jake, and he kind of picks up Jake and is going to kill him. But Eddie gets the gun. He's hanging there, but he can reach the gun, and he grabs it, and he starts pointing, but we know he can't aim because of his eye. and the killer uses Jake as a shield, but Jake is saying, shoot, shoot, shoot. And so Eddie does, and the first time he hits Jake, or at least grazes him, but Jake keeps saying, shoot, shoot. And so he shoots again, and he gets the killer right in the forehead, like right in the middle of the head on his mask plate. And the killer falls over. Cut to, a few minutes later, the cops are there, the ambulance is there. Jake is on a stretcher. He's going into the ambulance. He and Eddie have a sweet little scene where Eddie's like, I'll be there when you wake up. And then, so Jake gets put in the ambulance, gets taken off. Eddie goes over, because his sister, who's a cop, is there. And she is helping to push the stretcher that the killer's on. The paramedic says something, and Eddie's like, wait a minute, he's still alive? And the paramedic's like, oh, yeah, but he's a mess. This guy, he's no more dangerous than a carrot. And they push him up onto the ambulance, and Eddie is looking at his face. And the guy opens his eyes really fast and looks right at him, and then opens his mouth in this creepy smile to reveal that he still has Eddie's eyeball in his mouth. And so it's like his mouth is almost like a third eye, with Eddie's eye just staring out of it. And then it cuts to black, and that's the end. I loved that last image. I just thought it was hilarious.
That was the best ending this movie could have had. The whole movie had shades of Halloween. Because of the silent killer. There was so much of it that felt like Halloween. I would say Halloween crossed a little bit with Jeepers Creepers, crossed a little bit with Trick or Treat, that episode with the principal who was dressed up almost exactly the same way, out on Halloween, running around killing people silently, right? In kind of a similar fashion. I mean, obviously, Trick or Treat, I think, came out after this movie, and, Halloween was before it. And so, obviously, he was taking a lot from Halloween before this. But and then Jeepers Creepers, by a little bit of the humor, a little bit of that humorous nature, especially that ending.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked this movie. And I thought that, the scene that you just finished describing, where they were up on the balcony, or the fire escape, and the epicness of it, of him swinging there by his, even though it was a little unbelievable of having his handcuff hooked over the edge, it still made the movie seem like a bigger movie than it is. I mean, this is one of those points in where, they took this micro-budget film and just made it seem like a big-budget movie by this epic ending scene. And actually, what Jake had said was, shoot me. And I think what he was saying to Eddie was, if you aim at me, you end up hitting the other guy.
Oh,
yeah.
That makes sense.
Because there was this whole bit, which we didn't really talk about, but like you said, there were hints earlier about his eye not being right after some accident. And he and Jake had this moment where he was shooting at in the carnival, at one of the carnival games, where he couldn't hit anything, but Jake was trying to help him aim, so it was so cute. So anyway, it was neat how that all kind of tied together. Very cleverly written script, well acted. I loved these guys. I loved spending time with them. Even though they were written as tropes, they felt fresh. They felt genuine. They all seemed like friends. And I really, really hated to see each of them die when they did die. And there's so many horror movies, most of them actually, when I don't feel emotions like that at all. And this movie really gave me those emotions in spades. And I wasn't expecting it at all from this kind of film. I was so pleasantly surprised.
Good. I'm glad you liked it. I did too. And, it didn't get a wide release. It didn't make much money. But it was pretty much well received critically. I mean, there were some critics who didn't like it, but it got a lot of positive feedback from the critics too. And I think it's a good movie. And I don't know. I read that it kind of paved the way for all of these gay slasher movies. Well, I don't know where they are because I haven't seen a lot of them. But whatever. I think it was made with good intentions. I think it was made to, provide some representation to people who are not regularly represented or not represented in a serious way. A lot of the times when you have gay characters in a horror movie, they're the comic relief, or they're very stereotypical. And this movie, I felt like, was making a real effort to just paint these characters as just people. You know, they're just people who happen to be gay, and it's not that big a deal. And I liked that. I appreciated it.
It could have so easily gone into that territory where, you know, we're going to make this about them being gay or whatever, and it absolutely didn't at all. And I actually really liked the relationships between the characters, and I especially thought that the Jake character, it was interesting how that transformed throughout the time. You have Eddie, who, like we said, was sort of the kind of unsure, kind of pretty boy character who's interested in this Jake bad boy guy. This, for me, was shades of the Lost Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie the biker is kind of distant, kind of mysterious, even to the end is kind of mysterious and kind of hard.
Yeah, but I also liked what they did with his character in that he, you know, it turned out that he had recently been hurt by somebody, and that's why he was so kind of standoffish, and like he was down to, you know, get physical with Eddie, but he wouldn't kiss.
Mm-hmm.
And it was only after Eddie saved his life then they share a romantic kiss. And so even that character was given some depth, and I mean, that's good writing.
It is. It was excellent. And well acted, too. Just really well acted.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. We will be back the rest of this month with more Halloween-themed films. We've got a lineup already kind of set up. But if you have any suggestions, still throw them our way, because we're pretty darn flexible. If you liked this episode, you can find tons of back episodes on our website. You say it, Todd. I always screw it up.
twoguys.red40net.com.
You can also find us on Facebook, iTunes, Google Play, anywhere where you can find podcasts, you'll find us. Until next week, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.